in a crumbling Rust Belt city, where desperation breeds crime. Maria Ortiz fights to help those caught in addiction's grip. But when she uncovers a cartel scheme hidden within trusted medical institutions, Maria becomes their next target. Her brother Diego, a Special Forces veteran, races to save her while uncovering a web of corruption stretching into hospitals, clinics, and law enforcement. With time running out and powerful enemies closing in, how far will Diego and Maria go to protect their community from the cartel's deadly reach? Drop a comment and share where you're joining us from. If stories like this resonate with you, hit subscribe so you don't miss our next inspiring journey coming tomorrow. The cold, gray streets of the Rust Belt city stretched endlessly under a dull sky. Vacant factories stood like tombstones of a forgotten industrial era. Homeless encampments dotted empty lots, and graffiti-covered walls served as silent testimony to the city's decay. Crime thrived in the shadows, where desperation met opportunity. Maria Ortiz walked briskly down the cracked sidewalk leading to the East Side Community Health Clinic. Her breath formed visible puffs in the chilly air. At 32, Maria had seen more than her share of pain and struggle. As a community health worker, her mission was to help those drowning in addiction and neglect. The clinic, however, was underfunded and overstretched, its shelves frequently low on essential supplies. Inside, the waiting room was filled with patients, some haggard and weary, others trembling from withdrawal symptoms. Maria greeted the receptionist with a nod and moved toward the back, where she administered care and checked patient records. "Morning, Ms. Ortiz." Daniel, a young man in recovery, greeted her weakly from a chair in the corner. "Morning, Daniel. How are you feeling today?" Maria asked, pulling up a stool next to him. "Better, but I still get cravings," he admitted. "It's tough out there. Dealers hang around the shelters." Maria frowned. "I know. We're doing our best to keep them away. But they always seem to know when to show up." Daniel hesitated for a moment, then leaned in slightly. "I heard something. Some of the staff might be working with the dealers. I'm not sure who. But drugs come in and out of here too easily." Maria's eyes widened slightly, though she kept her composure. "Thank you for telling me, Daniel. I'll look into it." Over the next few hours, Maria continued her work, but her thoughts kept circling back to Daniel's words. She had noticed irregularities in the clinic's pharmaceutical inventory, medications disappearing without explanation, shipments arriving late or in smaller quantities than ordered. Patients had whispered about it, but now it seemed more than just rumor. Later that day, Maria met with Lana, a mother seeking help for her son, who had recently relapsed. "They promised me they'd keep the place safe," Lana said tearfully. "But the dealers always know when new medication comes in. My son never had a chance." Maria clenched her jaw. The signs were becoming too obvious to ignore. The very institution meant to protect the vulnerable might be compromised. As her shift ended, Maria gathered her things and stepped outside into the cold evening air. The streetlights flickered intermittently, casting long shadows across the clinic's cracked parking lot. She made her way to her car, her mind still racing with thoughts of missing medications and staff corruption. When she reached her car, she froze. A piece of paper was taped to the windshield, its edges curling slightly in the cold wind. In bold, hastily scrawled letters, it read, "Stay out of it." Beneath the message, someone had slashed a deep scratch across the windshield. Maria's heart pounded as she scanned the area. The parking lot was mostly empty, but a shadowy figure stood at the far end, partially obscured by a broken streetlight. The figure didn't move, and Maria couldn't make out any features. She quickly removed the note, stuffed it into her bag, and unlocked her car. Her hands trembled slightly as she slid into the driver's seat and locked the doors. The shadowy figure remained still, watching as she started the engine and drove away. The message was clear: someone didn't want her investigating the clinic's supply chain. But Maria wasn't the type to back down easily. If anything, the warning had only strengthened her resolve. As the dim city streets blurred past her, she silently vowed to uncover the truth, no matter the risks. Maria Ortiz entered the Northside Pharmaceutical Supply Center, her breath steady but her mind racing. She had used a professional pretext to arrange a meeting with Evan Harper, the facility's operations manager. Harper, a lean man with thinning hair, greeted her in his office. "We're always happy to support community clinics," he said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "What can I do for you, Ms. Ortiz?" Maria maintained her composure. "I've noticed discrepancies in our recent shipments, specific medications that are high in demand among those battling addiction. I wanted to review the supply logs to ensure everything is accounted for." Harper's expression faltered for a moment. "That's unusual. Let me pull up the records," he said, turning to his computer. Maria watched as he hesitated slightly before clicking through files. As Harper showed her the logs, Maria noticed red flags, duplicate entries, altered quantities, and vague references to emergency orders. Certain medications were marked as delivered in bulk, but the clinic had received only small portions. "Is there any reason some of these records don't match our clinic's inventory?" she asked calmly. Harper chuckled nervously. "Supply chain delays. Miscommunications. It's not uncommon. We can check with our distribution partners." Maria nodded but sensed his deflection. "I'd appreciate that. I'll follow up soon." After leaving the office, Maria parked her car a few blocks away and reviewed the photos she had taken of the records. The evidence suggested a coordinated effort to divert pharmaceuticals, likely involving more than just Harper. She decided to return later to dig deeper but knew she had already drawn attention. That night, as Maria locked up the clinic, she felt a growing sense of unease. The streets were quiet, almost too quiet. As she walked toward her car, she noticed two men in dark clothing stepping out of a nearby alley. "Ms. Ortiz," one of them called, his voice cold and authoritative. "We need to talk." Maria's instincts kicked in. She turned and began walking faster, but the men quickly closed the distance. One of them grabbed her arm, and she twisted, trying to break free. "Let me go," she shouted. But the second man blocked her path. "This isn't a request," he hissed. A van pulled up beside them, and Maria was forced inside. The doors slammed shut, cutting off her view of the clinic. Inside the van, the men restrained her and remained silent as the vehicle sped through the dark streets. Maria's mind raced, piecing together the events of the day. Whoever was behind this had powerful connections, possibly the cartel using the pharmacy network to launder drugs. The van stopped at an industrial building on the outskirts of the city. Maria was escorted inside and seated in a small, dimly lit room. After a few minutes, Ramon Salazar, a well-dressed man with a cold stare, entered. He radiated authority, his every movement calculated. "You've been asking too many questions," Salazar said, his tone calm but menacing. "That's dangerous." "I'm a health worker," Maria replied defiantly. "I'm trying to protect my patients. Your people are destroying lives." Salazar chuckled softly. "You think you're a hero? You don't understand how things work here. We have arrangements that keep this city running. Disrupt that, and people get hurt." Maria glared at him. "I won't stop. People deserve better than this." Salazar leaned closer, his smile fading. "You're alive because killing you would bring unwanted attention. But time is running out. If you keep pushing, you'll disappear quietly, and no one will know where you went." With that, Salazar stood and signaled to the guards. Maria was taken to another room, where she was left under surveillance. Despite the fear gnawing at her, she knew she couldn't give in. She had to stay strong and find a way out. Meanwhile, across the state, Diego Ortiz sat in a veterans center when his phone rang. He answered with a casual hello, but his expression darkened as the caller explained the situation. "Maria's missing," the voice said. "She was last seen leaving the clinic. We think it's tied to the drug trafficking she's been investigating." Diego's grip tightened on the phone. "I'm on my way," he said without hesitation. As he ended the call, memories of past battles resurfaced, missions where every second mattered. His sister was in danger. And this time, the enemy was on his home soil. Diego knew he couldn't waste any time. This was a fight he was prepared to take head-on. Diego Ortiz arrived in the city just before dawn. The skyline of aging industrial buildings and flickering streetlights greeting him with a grim familiarity. He drove straight to the police station, where Detective Rachel Novak met him in a sparsely furnished office. Novak, a 38-year-old veteran officer with tired eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, gestured for him to sit. "I've read your sister's file," Novak began, leaning forward. Maria was on the cartel's radar for a while. She started digging into pharmaceutical shipments tied to a medical supply network. That didn't sit well with some powerful people. "Why hasn't there been an official investigation?" Diego asked bluntly. Novak sighed. "We're understaffed. And to be honest, some people in this department might be on their payroll. I can't trust everyone here. If word gets out that we're digging deeper, they'll know before we do." Diego nodded, understanding the gravity of their situation. "I've dealt with this kind of corruption before. We work quietly and only with people we trust." They agreed to exchange any intelligence they gathered. Novak promised to provide access to local reports and surveillance data. Diego, in turn, would use his network and skills to track cartel movements. Later that morning, they visited the East Side Community Health Clinic, where Maria had been working. They interviewed Daniel, a young man in recovery who had spoken with Maria shortly before her disappearance. She was asking about missing shipments. Daniel explained. "There are rumors that some of the staff are involved, passing off drugs to dealers. I heard about deliveries being diverted before they even reached the clinic." Novak took notes while Diego observed Daniel closely. "Did Maria ever mention names?" Diego asked. "Not to me," Daniel replied. "But she was looking at the pharmacy's supplier records. That's when things got tense. I think she knew too much." They spoke to several other colleagues and clients, piecing together a clearer picture. The cartel appeared to be using legitimate medical institutions to funnel and distribute drugs. Fake orders, altered inventories, and suspicious staff transfers all pointed to a well-organized network. As they left the clinic, Diego turned to Novak. "We're not dealing with just street dealers. This is a full-scale operation with ties deep in the system." Novak nodded grimly. "And if we're going to take them down, we'll have to move fast, before they come for us next." If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to our channel, it means so much to us. Now, let's get back to the story. Diego Ortiz parked his car a safe distance from a warehouse located near the outskirts of the city. The building looked unassuming, surrounded by rusted fences and overgrown weeds. But Diego's instincts told him otherwise. He had followed Marco Herrera, a suspected cartel operative, from the supplier's office to this location. Herrera had entered with a delivery truck marked as a medical supply vehicle. Diego adjusted his binoculars, watching as several men began unloading crates from the truck. They moved quickly but carefully, suggesting they were handling something valuable. 2 armed guards patrolled the area, reinforcing Diego's suspicion that this was a critical part of the cartel's operation. As Diego observed, he noticed that some of the crates were labeled with hospital supply codes. He snapped several photos, ensuring the labels and faces of key individuals were captured. This evidence was crucial. It connected the cartel's drug trafficking to legitimate medical institutions, confirming Maria's earlier suspicions. Diego circled the perimeter quietly, searching for additional vantage points. Through a cracked window, he spotted Herrera speaking with another man who appeared to be in charge. They were pointing to a manifest while inspecting the crates. Diego used his phone's zoom camera to capture their conversation from a distance. He noticed something else troubling. Several of the crates were marked for urgent hospital deliveries scheduled for the following week. The cartel wasn't just distributing drugs, they were embedding their shipments into critical medical supply chains. After gathering enough evidence, Diego retreated to his car. He quickly encrypted the photos and sent them to Detective Novak. He followed up with a brief message, confirmed location. Cartel using warehouse to store and move drugs through medical supplies. Crates marked for hospital deliveries. We need to act fast. Novak replied within minutes, understood. Keep low. We'll plan the next steps tonight. Diego exhaled slowly, his grip tightening on the steering wheel. The cartel's reach was deeper than he had feared. They were exploiting both addiction and the healthcare system to maintain control. Time was running out, and any mistake could alert their enemies. Diego knew the next phase would be even more dangerous. But with Maria's life on the line, failure wasn't an option. Diego Ortiz and Detective Rachel Novak arrived at Dr. Leonard Hayes' office early in the morning, the head of the Eastside Community Health Clinic. Hayes was known for his polished public image, respected in healthcare circles, but Diego and Novak knew he was part of the cartel's operation. His involvement had become evident through altered supply records and patient testimonies. Hayes, a man in his early 50s with graying hair and an air of authority, greeted them cautiously. Detective Novak. Mr. Ortiz. To what do I owe the pleasure? He asked, forcing a smile as he closed the door behind them. Diego wasted no time. We know about the shipments. Hayes, you're working with the cartel to distribute drugs through the clinic and medical supply chains. Hayes stiffened, but quickly regained his composure. I have no idea what you're talking about. This clinic serves the community. Cut the act. Novak interrupted. We've got evidence tying you to suspicious orders, altered inventory records, and cartel operatives like Marco Herrera. You've got 2 choices: either cooperate and help us dismantle this operation, or go down with them. Hayes hesitated, his face pale. After a long pause, he sighed and sat down heavily in his chair. You don't understand. They forced me into this. They threatened my family. I didn't have a choice. You always have a choice, Diego said coldly. Now's your chance to do the right thing. What's their next move? Hayes leaned forward, his voice low. There's a major shipment coming in 2 days. It's being routed through St. Joseph's Hospital. They've hidden it in medical supply crates, just like before. If you can stop it there, you'll cripple their distribution network. Novak scribbled down the details. Who's coordinating it? Ramon Salazar. Hayes replied nervously. He oversees the entire operation in this region. He'll have people watching every step of the process. If they suspect anything, there'll be blood. Diego and Novak exchanged glances. This was the lead they needed. But it also meant the next steps would be extremely dangerous. Later that night, Diego and Novak planned a stakeout near the hospital's supply dock. They parked in a discreet location with a clear view of the area. Backup agents were stationed nearby, ready to act on their signal. This shipment is critical to the cartel's operations, Novak said, scanning the area with binoculars. If Salazar knows we're onto him, he won't hesitate to retaliate. He already knows. Diego muttered. Someone's feeding them information. As if on cue, a black SUV pulled up near the dock. Several armed men exited the vehicle, their movements purposeful. Diego recognized one of them, Herrera. The enforcers spread out, clearly expecting trouble. They know we're here, Diego said, gripping his weapon. We've been compromised. Suddenly, the first gunshot echoed through the night, shattering the tense silence. Diego and Novak ducked behind cover as bullets tore through their vehicle's windows. The cartel enforcers moved with precision, attempting to flank them. We need to fall back, Novak shouted, firing a few rounds to suppress their attackers. Diego nodded, returning fire as they retreated toward a nearby alley. Radio for backup, he called out. Novak managed to signal their team, who responded swiftly. Within minutes, sirens wailed in the distance, forcing the cartel enforcers to scatter. Diego and Novak took cover behind a dumpster, catching their breath as the gunfire subsided. Are you hit? Diego asked, scanning Novak for injuries. No. I'm good, she replied, panting. But they won't back off. Salazar knows how much we've uncovered. As reinforcements arrived, Diego stood, his face set with grim determination. Then we hit them harder. We take Salazar down, no matter the cost. Novak nodded in agreement. The stakes had escalated, and there was no turning back. They had one chance to dismantle the operation and save Maria before the cartel could retaliate further. The fight for control of the city's future had just begun. Maria Ortiz sat in a dimly lit room with barred windows, her wrists sore from the restraints that had been removed hours earlier. The silence of the cartel's safe house was oppressive, broken only by the occasional murmur of guards outside. Despite the fear gnawing at her, she refused to show any sign of weakness. The door creaked open, and a teenage girl was pushed inside. She stumbled slightly but quickly regained her footing. Maria stood and approached her cautiously. Hey, Maria said softly. What's your name? Lucia, the girl replied, her voice barely above a whisper. She looked frightened, her eyes darting around the room. I'm Maria. You're not alone. We'll find a way out of this, Maria reassured her, gently placing a hand on the girl's shoulder. Lucia shook her head. They'll kill us if we try. Not if we outsmart them, Maria said firmly. We just need to stay strong and look for an opportunity. Over the next few hours, Maria learned that Lucia had been trafficked under false promises of a better life. The girl had endured months of fear and control. As they quietly exchanged information, they began to plan their escape, taking note of guard rotations and potential exits. Their conversation was interrupted when Ramon Salazar entered the room. Tall and imposing, Salazar's presence was both commanding and cold. He slowly approached Maria, eyeing her with curiosity. You've got spirit, Salazar said with a smirk. Most people would have broken by now. But you just keep pushing. "I'm not afraid of you," Maria replied, standing her ground. Salazar chuckled. "You should be. You don't understand the forces at play here. We control more than just drugs. We have people in politics, healthcare, law enforcement. They all look the other way. That won't last," Maria shot back. "People like you always slip up." Salazar's smile faded. He stepped closer, his voice lowering. "Time is running out for you. Make peace with that." With one final glance, Salazar signaled to the guards and left the room. Maria's resolve hardened. She turned to Lucia and whispered, "We need to be ready. When our chance comes, we take it." Lucia nodded, the fear in her eyes slowly giving way to determination. Together, they would find a way to survive. Diego Ortiz and Detective Rachel Novak sat in a secure conference room, reviewing the latest intelligence. The evidence confirmed that a massive drug shipment was hidden within medical supply crates destined for St. Joseph's Hospital. The cartel planned to use the hospital's storage area to distribute the drugs across the city. "This is our chance to hit them where it hurts," Diego said, his eyes narrowing as he traced the hospital layout on a map. "But we need precision. If we alert them too soon, they'll scatter and relocate the operation." Novak nodded. "We can't afford any mistakes. I've got a few trusted officers who'll join the operation, and the FBI field office is sending reinforcements." Over the next few hours, they assembled a tactical team composed of FBI agents, local officers, and specialists trained for high-risk raids. Each member was thoroughly vetted to avoid leaks. In the staging area, the team listened as Diego laid out the infiltration plan. "The hospital's storage area is heavily monitored, but we'll exploit their shift change to get inside," Diego explained. "Novak's team will secure the main entrances while we move in through the service docks. Our priority is to locate the shipment and capture key operatives, including Ramon Salazar if possible." An agent raised his hand. "What about civilian safety? The hospital will still have patients and staff on site." "Good question," Novak responded. "We'll isolate the storage wing before making any moves. Staff will be evacuated from nearby areas under the pretense of a security drill." Diego glanced around the room, meeting each team member's eyes. "This operation needs to be swift and decisive. We're not just rescuing my sister, we're dismantling a network that's destroying this community. Let's make it count." The team nodded in unison, their expressions resolute. As night fell, the tactical units mobilized. Vehicles moved silently toward the hospital, headlights off to avoid detection. Diego sat in the lead car, his thoughts racing. Maria's life depended on their success, and there was no room for failure. "Ready?" Novak asked over the radio. "Let's do this," Diego replied. The vehicles came to a stop near the service entrance. Agents exited quickly and took their positions. The countdown had begun, and soon, the cartel's stronghold would be under siege. The tactical team breached the hospital's service entrance in coordinated silence. Armed agents moved swiftly, their footsteps muffled on the concrete floor. Diego Ortiz led one group through a back corridor while Novak's team secured the entrances to the storage area. The hospital wing was eerily quiet, with only the hum of industrial refrigerators and faint echoes from distant hallways breaking the stillness. "Storage area ahead," Diego whispered into his radio. The team fanned out, taking cover behind crates and shelves stacked with medical supplies. The moment they entered the storage room, gunfire erupted. Cartel operatives, hidden among the crates, opened fire with automatic weapons. Agents returned fire, their movements precise and calculated. Diego dove behind a metal cart as bullets ricocheted off the walls. "Watch the left flank," Novak shouted, taking cover near a pallet of supplies. She fired off a burst, striking one of the operatives. Diego scanned the room, spotting Marco Herrera, one of Salazar's key enforcers. Barking orders to his men, Diego signaled to his team and flanked the position. With quick, practiced movements, he fired and took down 2 cartel gunmen, forcing Herrera to retreat deeper into the storage area. "Push forward," Diego called out, leading the advance. He couldn't afford to lose momentum. Maria's life was at stake. Meanwhile, in a secure room within the hospital, Maria Ortiz and Lucia were left under the watch of 2 cartel guards. The chaos outside was their opportunity. As soon as the guards were distracted by the distant sounds of gunfire, Maria acted. She feigned a fainting spell, collapsing to the floor. "Hey! Get up!" one of the guards barked, approaching her cautiously. As he leaned down, Maria sprang to life, striking him in the throat. The guard stumbled back, gasping for air. Lucia seized the moment, grabbing a metal tray and smashing it over the second guard's head. Both guards fell to the ground, stunned. "Come on," Maria whispered urgently, grabbing Lucia's hand. They slipped out of the room and navigated the hospital's dimly lit hallways. Sirens echoed in the distance as the building's alarm system activated. "Down here," Maria said, leading Lucia into the basement. They found a small storage room and barricaded the door behind them. "We need to wait until it's safe," Maria whispered. Lucia nodded, fear and hope mingling in her eyes. Diego's team cleared the last of the resistance in the storage area. Herrera was captured, but Salazar was still unaccounted for. Diego's earpiece crackled with Novak's voice. "Diego, security just reported movement in the basement. Could be Maria." "I'm on it," Diego replied, breaking away from the main group. He moved quickly through the hospital's maze-like corridors, his weapon at the ready. He descended the basement stairs, heart pounding. As he reached the bottom, he heard faint voices. "Maria," he called out. "Diego?" Maria's voice echoed from a nearby room. He found the storage room and removed the barricade. Maria and Lucia emerged, relief washing over their faces. Diego quickly embraced his sister. "Are you okay?" he asked, scanning her for injuries. "We're fine," Maria assured him. "But the cartel won't give up easily." "Not today," Diego said grimly. Just then, heavy footsteps echoed from the stairwell. Cartel reinforcements had arrived, weapons drawn. Diego pulled Maria and Lucia behind cover and signaled for backup. A fierce shootout ensued, the confined space amplifying every shot. Diego fired with precision, taking down 2 attackers. Novak's team arrived moments later, flanking the reinforcements and forcing their surrender. "Clear!" Novak called out as the last cartel operative was disarmed and restrained. Diego exhaled slowly, lowering his weapon. The room fell into a tense silence, broken only by the sound of agents securing the scene. The cartel's operation had been dismantled, and Maria was safe. As agents seized the shipment of drugs hidden in medical crates, Diego turned to his sister. "It's over, for now." Maria nodded, her eyes filled with both exhaustion and determination. "We've stopped them here, but this fight isn't finished. They'll come back. Then we'll be ready," Diego replied firmly. Together, they walked toward the hospital entrance, knowing that while this battle was won, the war against corruption and exploitation was far from over. The authorities swiftly moved in to dismantle the cartel's local operations. Several high-ranking members, including Marco Herrera, were arrested, and the drug shipment was confiscated. The hospital resumed normal operations. But Diego Ortiz and Detective Novak remained cautious. They knew that while this raid had dealt a significant blow, the cartel's larger network still posed a threat. Outside the hospital, Maria embraced Diego. "This isn't over," she said quietly. "There are still people out there suffering. I need to keep fighting for them." "I know," Diego replied, his expression somber. "But be careful. They'll be watching." Later that night, Diego received a message on his phone. "You've delayed us, not stopped us. We are everywhere." He stared at the screen, his jaw tightening. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. The story emphasizes the devastating impact of drug trafficking on vulnerable communities and the toll systemic corruption takes on those fighting for justice. Diego Ortiz evolves from a battle-hardened soldier into a protector driven by a sense of duty to his family and community. Maria Ortiz transforms from a health worker overwhelmed by criminal influence into a resilient advocate, determined to save others from the grip of addiction and exploitation. Together, they embody the courage required to confront powerful forces, knowing the fight for justice is ongoing and fraught with sacrifice. The cartel's operation has been dismantled, but Diego receives a chilling warning: we are everywhere. How deep does this network go? What would you do in their position? Share your thoughts in the comments and join the discussion. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.